Hello there. This is a kind of description of how to approach this report. This is the kind of talk I would give a class, and I would just kind of go through it and point out the kind of approach that should work for you. So we'll just do it on a YouTube, and the only advantage to you of that is that you can hear parts of it over again if you want. But the basic approach is first, there's these little headers up above in this report. And by the way, the site is here, and you got that already probably linked in from the posted document. Um, and so there's a home screen, and so and this is where we're at now. And there's some basic stuff in that. I'm just paging down. So we're experiencing a changing climate, so you'd want to go there, and you can see that there's arrows either way, so that and that there's three possible places to be. So you want to make sure you explore each of those. So it talks about air quality here, economic losses from a low winter snowpack, hot, dry summer. Most of it's just kind of awareness stuff here. And it talks a bit about how it's touching our frontline communities. And so those are people who depend more heavily on natural resources for their livelihood, including farm workers, including Native Americans, and especially in reservation areas. And so also, you can keep paging down. So always go as far down as you can, as far to the right or left where there's an obvious way to do that. And so now that we're talking about the natural resource piece, you can see that again, there's three dots, so there's three screens there. So you just want to read each one of these, and think a little bit about what each one says, kind of developing awareness, okay, for that first one. Now, for the rest of these, they're more specific, especially these three up here. So, whereas that first one was really more of a kind of an introduction, really. So, climate itself, okay, so there's some basics here. And I'm going to page down this way. Hey, the whole region has warmed about 2 degrees Fahrenheit in the last 3 years. This came out in 2019. We're all warmer than the older long-term average, and 2015 was our warmest year. So this is there's some specifics there to jot down. I would just write maybe a little bit of this stuff here down, just so you kind of know that the recent decade has really been the hottest one. And also, a lot of areas really, really dry, including coastal Lincoln County, from as reflected in the low flows. Now, with this climate piece, there's the warming, there's the rainfall, sea level, and hot days. All of these have a basic theme, okay? And so the warming part, it just projects these different scenarios in terms of how much emissions the global society puts out. And so here's a finding. Warming is likely to be enhanced in mountainous areas in winter and spring and muted on the coast in the summer. And then a little bit about what RCP actually stands for. You can read that, but that's just the terminology they're using there to talk about how we manage emissions globally. And then a little bit about the Paris Agreement, just a kind of a little bit of a literacy piece for those of you that may not know much about the kind of international politics of climate change mitigation. And so a little more about that. This kind of talks about where the world is headed. You don't have to read more on that particular one. I wanted to save you that effort. So you can kind of skip past the read more on the future warming. It depends on. But this is, again, more specific stuff to Pacific Northwest. So we're still in the climate. Changes in rainfall are accentuating the extremes. And interestingly, out east, other side of the Cascades, I'm assuming that's what they mean by Eastern Oregon, but there's also Central Oregon. If you're in Bend, you don't say we're in Eastern Oregon. I'm not sure quite what they meant by that. But the extreme precipitation may change more on the east side than on the west side. That's just the projection there. And when you get heavy rainfall related to that, then there are things that happen. Unstable slopes, landslides, closing highways, this sort of stuff, and they give an example of that. So then let's see, we're almost to the end. Said a little more stuff in it, but annual precipitation, unlike temperature, has no long-term trend toward wetter or drier. That's kind of an important point. We're not really supposed to get either wetter or drier just in terms of major precipitation. But what happens is that droughts, even in the same amount of rainfall, if it's distributed differently, you can get worse droughts. So, for example, if you get more rain in the winter and less in the summer, you can have bad droughts in the summer, even with an annual precipitation total that is within the range of normal. And also we'll talk about extreme events here of heavy rainfall like atmospheric rivers. You don't have to read more on that one either. A little bit about sea level rise. Not a big emphasis in this class. I'm not going to talk about sea level in here. Don't need to worry about that. That's probably going to be a very minor thing, except for a few coastal areas where they're also sinking at the same time, and where there's tectonic subsidence, then yeah, you're going to have more problems with changing sea level. But many areas of the world are much worse than Oregon on that. That's not our biggest concern, just frankly. If you're in Florida or anywhere on the East Coast or in Shanghai, China, a lot of Pacific Islands, Bangladesh, those are the places that are really, really worried, those kind of places. So more hot days, a little bit more about that. And that's a little hard to interpret this one. You don't have to worry about this. It basically just means that we're going to have more and more hot days, more likely. Okay. All right. So that's the first part of the climate piece. And what I want to do is go now. We did the warming, I believe. And do we do that? I just want to make sure yes. Just want to make sure that's what we're supposed to be doing. So then there's also rainfall, sea level, and hot days. So the sea level part, oh yeah, we did all this. Yeah, okay. It's a little confusing when you go down and around. But anyway, yes, we looked at all of that. So again, just minimizing sea level on that. Okay. Now the next one, and this may be, these next two probably are the biggest kind of stories, really, I think. One is this snow and the water supply. And so what happens is, hey, if the winters are warmer and maybe wetter, that can mean some real differences in how snow works for our water supply, and we may end up with more runoff earlier. That's basically what this says. And by the way, you can pause this YouTube anywhere you want. I'm just going to kind of flow through this. But decreases in April for snowpack. That's kind of the standard way it's measured every year. Okay, what do we have on April 1st? That tells us what's available to melt for the rest of the spring and into the summer. And so that number then is a baseline for all that high quality water that we get from melted snow that is the highest quality water in the region, including much of it comes from, by the way, the Columbia River comes from Canada. Summer flows are jeopardized. I mean, if you have more runoff in the winter, then you're going to have less in the summer. So, and we're already seeing that. It's been going on. And and you're going to get, in fact, a chance to look at what's going on in the summer in terms of climate, rainfall, temperatures. So you'll get a chance to look at that. And here's kind of the Willamette River. I'll emphasize just a tiny bit this. Look at that. That is our historical line, and what we're thinking is that we're going to have bigger, in some of these scenarios, probably bigger winter flows, but less in the spring and summer, right when we need it. That's the challenge. That is the challenge. Okay. So that's snow, water supply, fire risk. Whoa, gosh, I'm just producing this in October, and we know about fire risk a little bit now, don't we? I'm sorry to say that, but it was a bad September and August even for us. So it sounds familiar. So this has 4 different points on here. Just read each one and just kind of be a little bit aware of all of this. There's the Eagle Creek fire. That was in the Columbia River Gorge, I-84, if you don't know where that is. And so fire risk, where are the risks going to be rising? The largest increases in the Willamette Valley and eastern Oregon. I had to evacuate out of a fire here on the Oregon coast. So even here, where I'm currently producing this, associated wildfire smoke creates a health hazard. Well, we saw those 500, air quality index of 500 and worse in the Willamette Valley. That was terrible. So fires, yeah, just some stuff on that. Here's a little summary of some of the science, and we're going to look at that a little more carefully next time, third week of this class. So the risks, again, are more moving to the east side. You don't need to know the risk map down there. Okay. The read more, for those of you that don't want to do a paper on this, I would recommend you read more. We're going to draw a little bit on this next week as well, week 3. So some of this is a little more technical and so on, but some great stuff there. And there is an association between, just to point it out, the July through September precipitation anomaly and the temperature anomaly, and then how that combines to make drought. And drought then, of course, is water stress for vegetation. So that's fire risk. Agriculture, there aren't a lot of statements made in this one, but one of the things that's interesting is that we will have a longer growing season, and that sounds good, but in areas where there's not more water, but there's a warmer, longer time of year, maybe we won't have enough water to really take advantage of that. It could have the opposite effect, stressing out plants in some cases. So it could be good in some ways if you've got the water and you've got a possibility of growing more crops. That can be a plus for some well-watered farms, and a negative for others that don't have extra water they could use or access. So just a little bit about that. Wow, lengthening the growing season by maybe 2 months by the middle of the century. I probably will be about done with my life by then, but a lot of you are just getting started, so you'll be about my age. A little bit about, there's concern about bigger problems with pests, weeds, crop quality, increased irrigation demand. I talked about the last one already, okay? So that kind of stuff. So there's just kind of a good little sampling of some of the things that happen. So you have heat stress. That heat stress isn't just on crops, but also humans. Which those kind of people at the front lines we talked about earlier. And there's some interesting adaptive approaches that reduce weather and climate-related risks. One of them is farmers in Eastern Oregon doing no-till farming, described here. And then there's an interesting one in the Willamette Valley where they are using dry farming methods to reduce reliance on irrigation water. So this is already kind of maybe a little bit of a pre-adaptation to what might be more water-scarce summers. Something to be aware of. And so you don't have to go to the full report part. So I just wanted to get you some awareness of all of this. And I hope that this little 13-minute video got you there. Just know especially some of the facts, the findings specific to the region, and I did emphasize those a bit more. So that's the kind of stuff you should have some awareness. I'll probably give you there'll be probably a few questions, or I could even ask maybe like a true and false, something like the April 1st snow accumulations are less than they used to be, which causes water management problems. In the summer, that would be an easy one. That's true, but that sort of nature, right, where you just awareness of what the basic challenges and in some cases opportunities are. Okay, thanks.